Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with David, King Messiah. And this one is the soul of Messiah. The soul of Mashiach is David, and it was prepared before creation for the purpose of the end of Israel's salvation, the entire process, and for the rectification of all of creation. The soul of Mashiach is kept beneath the throne of glory. Now, this is a very special place where all the righteous souls are kept, or the souls of the righteous, rather. Now, we've learned from the death of Moses how God called his soul to reside beneath his throne. After he smacked away the angel of death and chased after him, God had to stop him and say, okay, Ad Kan, enough. And he called the soul out of Moses. In Avot de Rabbi Natan, it speaks of this as well in chapter 12. It says, "Finally, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses, Moses, you've had enough of this world. The world to come has been prepared for you since the 6 days of creation. As it says in Exodus 33:22, God said, here is a place near me, stand on that rock," right? In the cleft of the rock. The Holy One, blessed be he, took Moses' soul and stored it under the throne of glory. As it says in 1 Samuel 25:29, "And the soul of my master will be bound up in the bundle of life." We're going to get to this in a second. "And when he took it, he did it with a kiss, as said in Deuteronomy 34:5, Moses passed, right, by the mouth of God. And not only Moses' soul is stored under the throne of glory, but also the souls of all the righteous. That is where they are stored. Now, it says in 1 Samuel 25:29, "A man has arisen to pursue you." This is where that verse comes from, the bound in the bundle of life, if you haven't heard this. "A man has arisen to pursue you and to seek your soul, but my Lord's soul," she said to David, "shall be bound in the bundle of life with the Lord your God, while the souls of your enemies, the Lord will sling it with the hollow of the sling." So these are two different things over here. Like the good part is the tzror hachaim, the bundle of life, and then the bad place, right, is sling it with the hollow of the sling. This is a place called kaf hakela, almost like a slingshot or a catapult. This is tremendous torment for the soul. This is not bound by time. This is outside of space and time and can last thousands and thousands of years. I've heard some punishments, they go, let's say, 50,000 years. How could it be 50,000 years if we're only not even 6,000 years of creation? Because again, outside of space and time, it would feel like that kind of time. Others are there for all of eternity. But what it is essentially is that your soul is being flung from one end of reality to the next, while it's like you're a soccer ball, right? And you got 22 angels of destruction just coming and kicking you, having fun with your soul, destroying it. Back and forth, back and forth. You're being slung. Bekaf hakela. Kaf is the hand. Kela is like David had a sling. So you see both sides. David's on one side and his enemies, the enemies of Israel, are on the other. Now, could it be that the souls of the wicked are there too? The verse continues, like we said, "While the souls of your enemies, the Lord will sling with the hollow of the sling." The bundle of life, tzror hachaim, is what we bless those who passed. We say, "Tieh nishmato tzrura betzror hachaim," at their funeral. We also write it on the gravestones. If you've ever been to a cemetery, I don't know if a Jewish cemetery in the States, but all around the gravestones in Israel, they're marked Taf Nun Tzadik Bet Tehe Nishmato Tzrura Betzror Hachaim. So, beloved father, husband, mother, wife, whatever, the date of passing and everything. And underneath you see these letters, Taf Nun Tzadik Bet. Okay? That's where it came from that very verse. Again, the verse is in 1 Samuel 25:29. So it gives you the best place to be and the absolute worst place to be in the afterlife. This is where you want your soul to be once you leave this physical plane. That's the VVVIP section, if you will. And the prophetess Abigail said this to David when he was asking where he stood as far as his rectification in this world. In other words, where am I going? She told him that his soul was already bound in the bundle of life according to the Maharsha. And this soul of David, aka Mashiach, there's nothing like it in this world, for it stood and will stand against the congregation of evildoers, workers of iniquity, and legions of darkness, aside from the cherubim who stood while the temple was built. In Megale Amukot, the revelation of the depths, cool name, right? It sounds cooler in English, but Megale Amukot, that's what it means, literally translated. For Parashat Va'etchanan, it says that David stood all his days opposing the dogs. That is the secret of midnight. Now, before I explain how and why dogs are referenced, you must know I'm a dog lover, okay? So this is not, I'm not ranking on dogs, love dogs, okay? There's a very specific reason, of course. So a dog, as we know, kelev in Hebrew, was named that way because their spiritual root and personality. Adam was the one that named all the creatures, all the animals. He told when the angels were complaining to God, they're like, what is man that you are mindful of him? God said, okay, go ahead. Name all the animals. Now, we're not talking about animals as they look today, just like Adam was not a man like we look today, but rather filled up the entire space. So he saw the spiritual root of the nefesh, because nefesh chaya, it also says in day 6, right? That the beasts of the field became nefesh chaya, just like man became a nefesh chaya. And so when we don't do what we're supposed to do, then we are likened to the beasts of the field if we don't follow Torah. Straight up. So the angels are like, no, we are unable to do this. So they said, okay, so then Adam did it. And that's what happened. So based on the personality and the root of the animals, he named them. He gave them the appropriate name. So kelev is very appropriate, as we see, for the dog nowadays, right? A dog can feel your energy and your rhythmic heartbeat, and it is within its nature to match itself to its human on every level. We saw this documentary about dogs and everything. Let's say when you leave your dog, right? Your dog's their home and you go to work, your dog's heart breaks. That's why they're so excited when you come home. They can't contain themselves, and then they want to be around you, and then they sense your heartbeat and your heart rate and your emotions, and they sync their entire being to you. Okay? If you're happy, your dog's happy. If you're sad, your dog will sit there and cry with you or comfort with you. If you are tense or on edge, remember, it's not your dog's fault that he's acting like a maniac. It's literally feeding off your energy, off your heart. That is its nature. Also, kalev benifune, right? According to his heart. Kalev, exactly the same spelling. They're one and the same in that instance. This is a positive thing. But this can be a beautiful thing, obviously done correctly, but if you neglect to train a dog, right, it can be a nightmare, not to mention extremely dangerous. Everything has its place. You guys remember the dog whisperer back in the day, right? He says there's no such thing as a bad dog, only a bad owner. Okay, so who are these dogs that David was standing against? All right. So dogs aren't evil, God forbid, simply because it is their nature. If they don't know where they're at, and if you do not tell them exactly what to do, they go nuts. Then they go to their base instinct. That being said, dogs are considered impure animals, and they are. Absolutely. They're impure animals, and there are laws regarding keeping dogs in the home, when and how often to pick them up and the like, and we don't need to get into it now, but I'll just tell you, I read up on this. You're not allowed to lift your dog on Shabbat because it's considered muktzah. Of course, you could pet your dog if they need that kind of attention, but you're not allowed to lift them up. Your dog should not be around you when you're learning Torah or teaching Torah or anything to do with Torah, because a dog's an impure animal. So let's say if I go to my friend's house on Shabbat after Kiddush, they got this cute little white dog and everything. And, she likes me and I like her, and I always play. But then if we want to say Kiddush, I have to go and wash my hands. Not only it's a clean dog, but not only for cleanliness reasons, but actual netilat yadayim, because now I'm going to hear Kiddush and I just touched an impure animal. See how that works? In all things. Okay. So, Satan and his mate Adam's ex-wife, are likened to black, unsatiable dogs. There are plenty of midrashim, if we want to get into many, many deep things in ancient hidden texts that people should not know of. They're likened to black, unsatiable dogs. Isaiah describes them as follows in 56:11. And the dogs are of greedy disposition. They know not satiety, and they are shepherds who know not and do not understand. They all turn to their way, each one to his gain, every last one. In the more Kabbalistic works, they are called Kalvin da Chatzifin, Chatzuf, Chutzpah, right? Brazen dogs. And we see Isaiah says that they are likened to shepherds, right? Who have no understanding. As we said, understanding comes exclusively from God. It is not something that you can acquire like knowledge or something we are born with like wisdom, right? Anybody could read the Bible and quote verses from the Bible. That's knowledge, right? It would be wise for you to pick it up and try and make some sort of connection over there. That's wisdom. But to actually get understanding, as in what does this actually mean? What do I get from this? That comes exclusively from God, okay? And why shepherds? Because they lead the sheep astray based on their own understanding. As the verse then says, and these are likened to Satan and his ex-wife. They all turn to their way, each one to his gain, every last one. So again, David stood all his days opposing these dogs. This is the secret of midnight. Now, David, he's the ultimate shepherd, if you will, the seventh and culmination of all those who came before him. Moses is known as the faithful shepherd, right? We've known this. It's actually written over there. God said it to Aaron and Miriam. But David, when we sing the song at the end of the candle lighting of Hanukkah, Maoz Tzur, we ask that God bring us ro'eh shiv'ah. In some texts it says ro'im shiv'ah. The seven shepherds or the seventh shepherd. The seven shepherds, meaning we need David, King Mashiach, he is the seventh, right? Or the seven shepherds, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph and Moses and Aaron, and then David, okay? Either way, it's all the same thing. As we know, David famously got out of bed every night at true midnight. What is true midnight? True midnight is not 0000. Every night it changes depending on where the sun and the moon is. Okay, so our calendars as Jews, it is never exactly the same. One day is different than the next. Always moving, constantly. And you need to know these times because these times are auspicious times. So if you wake up at true midnight, sometimes it could be 11:41, sometimes it could be 12:41. You see? Also, when to daven mincha. When is the peak time to daven mincha? Or when is the time to daven shacharit, for instance, the morning prayers at nitz. There's a very specific time to do it. And when you pray there, does it make a difference if you just pray, let's say, at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning? Absolutely. You get credit for praying shacharit, but when you pray at these specific times that God gave us, it does an even greater tikkun. You understand? So that's why we always look for these auspicious times to do the things we're already going to do. Just do them at this time. It would be good for you. Okay, so David had his harp above his bed, and the ruach, the spirit, the wind, strummed his harp, and that is what awakened him every night at true midnight, and that's where he started to praise God. He sang about this in Psalms 94:16. Who will rise up for me against evildoers? Who will stand up for me against workers of iniquity? And what's the significance of the true midnight? From the moment the sun sets, that's a tremendous time of judgment coming in to the world. It's also Ben Ha'arbayim, from the time where you can't see the sun anymore. There's about 20 minutes in the summer time, 13 and a half minutes in the wintertime, until you can actually see the stars. This is when the judgment really comes about, and there's also a very specific offering that they give in the temple at that time. That's also a very auspicious time to pray mincha. Right as the sun goes down, go before the stars come up, because then you're like right over there, you're battling these dogs, if you will. And then from that point onward, all the way throughout the night until the true midnight, is a time of extreme judgments that happen in the world. That's why there's certain things in the Torah that you should not be learning at that time. During this time, our sages actually slept. They slept 6 hours a night. Sun sets, they daven Marv, they have dinner, they go to sleep, they wake up at true midnight, and then they start to learn Torah and they start to pray all the way. So that's how their day goes. Today, it's pretty much impossible to do it if you live in the Western world and you gotta, work for a living. That's what we do. So at that time, at that true midnight, you break the klipot severely, and that is what David was known to do. Who will rise up for me against evildoers? Who will stand up for me against workers of iniquity? And then in Psalms 22:17, David says, "For dogs have surrounded me. A band of evildoers has encompassed me. Like a lion, my hands and my feet." To stand in the place of the Father, as David was to Solomon, to protect us against these klavim chitzonim, these foreign dogs who are hungry and have opened their mouths against us. Now, when we use the term chitzoni, it literally means outside or outsiders. Chitzon, like outer space. Space is halal, right? Halal means like as in an empty space. Halal hachitzon, outer space. So the chitzonim, this refers to the klipot. Okay, so the klavim chitzonim, the outside dogs, they come and they try and get into the holiness. So this means simply outside of holiness, the outside forces who leech onto the holiness for sustenance, suckling the life force, right? In other words, without the holiness, their source of food, if you will, their life source, they could not exist. They wouldn't and couldn't exist. The only reason they exist is because there is that holiness over there which they suckle from. Take the Torah, for instance, right? Then take all the other religions who built or add to our Torah. Spiritual vampires, if you will, or without the Torah, they would have nothing. Well, you want to start the story from there? Go ahead. But what are you going to build it on? See? Always look to the point of origin. Always look to what came first. And always look to, if you remove the Torah, no legs to stand on. It's very simple. This is logical. This goes, you could believe whatever you want, but it's logic. Anyway, David prophesied all these things, and of his own death as well, as said in Masechet Shabbat 30b. Since David died in the garden, 12-year-old Solomon sent the following question to the Sanhedrin. So Solomon was already king. He was anointed and crowned king shortly before David's death. And then David passed away, as we know, while he was singing Tehillim. He took a break for a moment, and some say it was in his chambers. Some say it was on the steps going down to the garden. Some say it was in the garden. So like we said, according to Masechet Shabbat 30b, it says that he was in the garden, right? And that's where he fell. That's where his spirit left him. And that was also on Shabbat, Shavuot, which was exactly his birthday. So as we know, all the tzaddikim, they passed on Shabbat. Shabbat, there's no struggle between this world and the next on Shabbat. It is a tremendous amount of mercy for anyone to pass, even on a Friday afternoon, all the way to Motzei Shabbat, up until midnight, because it is still considered all the part of Shabbat. Anyone who passes on those times, it is a tremendous amount of mercy from God. There's no struggle. Okay? Anyway, so that's when David passed, because he was a righteous man, born and died exactly on the same day, meaning his circle was complete. Right? So 12-year-old Solomon, King Solomon, sent the following question to the Sanhedrin. He said, "Father died and is lying in the sun, and the dogs of father's house are hungry." That could mean, so much more than just woof woof, hungry, but rather they're hungry. Okay. "What shall I do?" They sent an answer to him, and they said, "Cut up an animal carcass and place it before the dogs." Since the dogs are hungry, handling an animal carcass to feed them is permitted. So in other words, you can't do that on Shabbat for no reason. That would be desecrating the Shabbat. It would also be bar tashchit. Anything you want to do on Shabbat for the sake of Shabbat if it doesn't break the laws of Shabbat, it is obviously permitted to do. So you are allowed to cut up an animal carcass in order to feed the animals. That's something you do on Shabbat anyway. You have to feed your animals, right? In fact, you have to feed your animals before you feed yourself. This is a law, okay? And with regard to your father, in other words, that takes care of the dogs. They're not going to eat David, right? With regard to your father, it is prohibited to move a body directly since it was Shabbat. Also, you cannot do this on Shabbat. What do they say? Place a loaf of bread or an infant on top of him, and then you can move him into the shade. In other words, use him almost as like a tray to carry the child or to carry the bread. You cannot break one of the 10 commandments to honor your father. You think, well, the King David, okay. What do you think David would want his son Solomon or anyone else, doesn't matter who, break Shabbat because of him? No. You see, this is where we have to separate the emotions from the halacha. David was the head of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin, these were the same guys that, later on, many, many generations later, they're the ones that compiled the Talmud. All the writings over there, this started 2,500 years ago. It was only jotted down 600, 700, 800 years later. But all these conversations from all these great sages, that was a Sanhedrin. David was at their head. Just so you understand, he was a Talmid Chacham and a Posek. He did everything according to halacha. So this is Solomon. He's 12 years old before he received the wisdom, and he actually asked the elders, doing it properly, what should I do? How do I not break Torah and halacha and still I'm able to honor my father? And they gave him that answer. King David is the fourth leg in the chariot. Now it's strange. Chariot is Merkava. When I was in the army, I was in tanks. My tank was called a Merkava. Merkava is, the ancient chariot, but it could also mean the throne of God. They're kind of one and the same. So that's why it says leg and not wheels. So it's like 4 legs of a throne. All right. Zohar Balak says that David is the fourth leg of the throne. And in Zohar Yitro, it says that he is the fourth leg, and upon him the Holy and Blessed be he hovers, meaning out of the other 3. That is Abraham, who is loving kindness, Isaac, who is judgment, Jacob, who is splendor, and David, who is kingship. In Megillah Mukot, the Revelation of the Depths, it is written that I love that name. It is written that the numerical value of Abraham, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and David is equal to Merkava Shlema. Therefore, names Merkava Shlema, a perfect or complete chariot. Not only that, but it is said that David became the chief of those 3. Now, make no mistake, as you know from my teachings, right? The patriarchs are the very reason that God made the covenant with Israel. They were the first, specifically Abraham, who was called one by God. God called him one. Only God is one, but God called Abraham Echad. And through him the world was formed, right? If you read in Genesis 2:4. David, being the head over these 3, takes nothing away from them, because this is not a competition. Again, in Judaism, it's not who's the greatest and who's this. Who does that job best? That is who God chose for that specific job. But this job cannot be done if this person over there doesn't do their job. And you'll see everything is a link in a chain. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, right? Moses, and so on and so forth, going all the way up until where we are today. We are all tied to one another. Kol Yisrael arevim ze lazeh. We're tied to one another. If one sinks, we got to lift him up. If one rises, he helps to raise everybody else. This is Israel. Okay, so again, like we said, it's not about who is greater. There's no quarrel amongst brothers, just like Moses and Aaron were genuinely happy for one another. There was no envy among them, as they both served God with all their hearts. And just like we read in this week's Parsha, Ephraim and Menashe, though they were switched and the younger received the greater honor, it's because the younger throughout his life, throughout the generations, would produce greater tzaddikim. That's it. And Menashe was not upset that Ephraim got that honor, because they both loved God. And they're like, great, if you could do a better job serving God than I can in that capacity, I'm going to help you, dude. It's all good. You see, if there's no ego when it comes to this. Look at what it says in Masechet Moed Katan 17b. as taken from 2 Samuel 23:8, where it says, "These are the names of the mighty men who served David. He who sat in the assembly of the wise, the chief of the three." Now you're going to see other names over here, but we're talking about on a much deeper level. Rosh Hashalishi. That is what David is called over here. So the Gemara asks, what is this verse saying? What's going on here? Rabbi Abahu said, this is what the verse is saying. These are the names of the mighty actions of David. These expressions should not be read as names of people, but instead a description of David's good deeds. Yoshev Bashevet. I got to read this in Hebrew. So again, Ele Shmot Hagiborim Asher LeDavid. These are the names of the mighty men who were with David, who served David. Yoshev Bashevet Tachkemoni. Yoshev, right? Yoshev is to sit. Yoshev Bashevet indicates that when David would sit, Yoshev, in the study hall, in the Beit Midrash, when he wasn't fighting battles, David was studying Torah. Every moment that he was awake, and he barely slept, as we know. David did not taste death in his life. He had 70 complete years. He would sit upon pillows and cushions as an important person. He would not sit upon pillows and cushions as an important person ordinarily would. Rather, he would sit on the ground like one of the students. This is not to say that he actually sat on the floor. They had carpets or whatnot, right? But he wouldn't be in an elevated space compared to everybody else. Rather, he would sit on the ground. He would sit low like one of the students. For as long as David's teacher, Ira, the Jarite, Ira Hayairi, was alive, Ira would teach the sages while sitting on pillows and cushions. In other words, anybody that taught David anything, so long as they were still alive, David would not allow himself to be on a higher level than them. Of course not. Even if they taught him one or two things, it doesn't matter. Just like Achitophel. When Ira passed away, David would teach the sages. And he did this while sitting on the ground. In other words, just because he was, at this point, he was like top dog, so to speak, right? But he did not elevate his own standing. He's still sitting right there because really, what, I'm going to lift myself up over all these people when we're all learning the Torah of God? We're all on the same level before God. You see, this is David. This is our guy. They said to him, Master, you should sit upon pillows and blankets. He did not accept their suggestions, since in his humility he did not wish to appear as the teacher of Israel. I'm a simple Jew. What do you want? I fight, I learn, I teach. That's it. I'm good. Leave me here. He was so humble when it came to Torah. To find Ira, you can look at 2 Samuel 20:26, where it says, and Ira the Jarite was a chief official to David. V'gam Ira Hayairi haya kohen leDavid. If you read this in the Hebrew, you're like, wait, was he a priest? No, he was not a priest. The reason it doesn't say priest to David is because this is a Jewish translation, not a non-Jewish translation. They probably would have said a priest, but he wasn't a priest. Like we said, just because it says Kohen, it does not mean priest. Mechahen means, in other words, it was a reign. It was a sign of authority. Okay, that's what it was. And he was his Torah teacher. Let's continue. In this verse, David is described as a tachkemoni, like we said, comes from the word chacham. Rav said, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, since you have humbled yourself, be you now like me, tehe kamoni. How so? As I issue a decree, and you, owing to your righteousness, may nullify it. Who else do we see this with? We saw this with Moses. God's like, I'm going to take him out. Moses is like, please don't. God's like, fine. Right? God just gave David a veto. Gave him the power of a veto. And the section goes on to say, David is also described here as chief of the captains, Rosh Hashalishim, because God said to him, you will be the head, Rosh, of the three. Shloshet Ha'avot, the three patriarchs. The same was Adino the Eznite. This alludes to the fact that when David would sit and occupy himself with Torah, he would make himself soft me'aden et atzmo, adin, soft and gentle as a worm. Like he famously said, Ani tolat velo adam, I am a worm and not a man. And when he would go to war, it's the same man, but not the same man. He would make himself hard and strong as a tree. So you have the same man, you have a warrior, and I wouldn't even say poet, right? When he learned Torah, it humbled him so much. The more he learned, the more he was humbled. The more he received that reverential fear because he realized the scope of things. So let's say it doesn't make you smaller, okay? In other words, you stay the same size, but you ever see those videos where it shows you planet Earth and next to planet Earth, all the other planets of the solar system, and then it gets to the sun and you're like, wow. And then it goes to other galaxies and, Andromeda B or whatever, I don't know. And you just see how, wait a minute. So we're like a speck of dust and there are all these other massive bodies out there. It gives you perspective. That doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the understanding that David received from learning Torah and the vastness of all of reality. A worm. That's the only thing I can describe myself as, said David, wisely, yes? But when he went to war, unshaken. Like we said, he didn't have necessarily bloodlust in the sense of he enjoyed killing. He enjoyed the fact that he got to take out God's enemies. True zeal, without himself in there. He never looked for a fight, right? In fact, in the Torah, you're never commanded to look for a fight. You always have to first come with peace. No peace will kill you. So that's what happened with David, and that's exactly what he did. There is another opinion that David alone carries the three. This can be found in the Gates of Illumination, Gate 3, Section 4, that says, the patriarchs are the aspect of chesed, gevura, and tiferet, like we said, also chesed, loving kindness, judgment and mercy, and King David is the secret of the fourth leg in the chariot, and he includes all three aspects of loving kindness, judgment, and mercy. And of him it is said, 1 Samuel 16:12, Admoni im yafe enaim vetov ro'i. And he sent and brought him, and he was ruddy, with beautiful eyes, and a handsome appearance. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is he, right? He told this to the prophet Samuel. So, Admoni, ruddy, red, judgment, with beautiful eyes, looking favorably upon people, chesed, loving kindness, and handsome appearance. His actions are that of mercy. In other words, he exuded these three characteristics in a perfect way. King David, peace be upon him, inherited the aspect of malchut, kingship, as its intention to perform chesed, loving kindness, mercy, and pass judgment. He had to be all three. You'll see this. To give charity as well as execute judgments according to the halachot of the Torah. Therefore, David was enveloped in the secret of dam, admoni, ruddy, red, adom, dam, as he would fight the wars of God against the enemies of God, and his sword never returned void. What does this mean? We can see this in 2 Samuel 22:38, and similarly in Psalms 18:38. So if you're going to read the life of David, you'll see some of the Psalms inserted in there because that's when he wrote them. It's beautiful. Now we get an idea, right? So Psalms 18:38, where it says, I have pursued my enemies and overtaken them, never turning back until they were consumed. Erdof oivai va'asigam velo ashuv ad kalotam. And I will not return, in other words, until the mission is complete, until the job is done. Just like when God said that my word never returns void, from Isaiah, where is it? 54, 55, I believe. Right? Just like the rain comes down, it does its job, same thing. If David drew his sword, that means dudes were going to die. Many, many. Okay. So like we said, he had all these three aspects. When David was enveloped in the aspect of Yafe Enaim, beautiful eyes, he would sustain Israel as he practiced loving kindness, acting towards them with a kind eye, always judging them favorably, not according to halacha. We're talking about him in a personal manner, right? Now, if you read some of the stories of David, as he judged Israel, because he was a judge, he would sit there. The Jews would come and they'd bring the cases before the judge, who is the king, right? There was one time he had a case that was theft, cut and dry. The guy stole, right? Thou shalt not steal. He did. Okay. The thief was found guilty because he committed a crime, and he was sentenced to return the monetary equivalent of what he stole. The catch was that he no longer had anything to give and would have to be placed either in servitude or in prison. Now, once the proper judgment was passed, according to the laws of God, as David would never sway, he then proceeded to pay the fine for the thief from his own pocket, showing loving kindness. You see, what is a bribe? A bribe is, let's say, oh, I feel bad. Even if your emotions, right? You have to separate emotions from this. I feel bad for this guy. I'll judge in his favor. He didn't steal, but that's not proper judgment. You are guilty, my friend, and you have to pay this fine. I can't pay the fine. So now, not David the king and the judge, David the man said, hey, I got you, brother. Don't worry about it. Now, obviously, if you're thinking, well, then I could just do this and David will bail me out. Well, you think David's stupid? Obviously, he saw the situation and he judged the situation. You are guilty. I know that you regret what you did. You did tshuva, here we are. But a debt needs to be paid. I got you, my brother, from his own pocket, not from the pocket of the public, from his own pocket. This was King David. Huh? I mean, right? Oh, man. When David was enveloped in tovroi, good appearance, he would delve into the depths of Torah as he beheld its secrets and merited to taste of its splendor. Oh, I can't. Just, again, I wrote this, right? I studied this, right? But just reading this again to you right now, I'm getting emotional. And since David grasped onto these three attributes of loving kindness, judgment, and mercy, he became the fourth leg carrying all the three, as said in Exodus 23:14, Shalosh regalim tachogli b'shana. 3 times you shall offer to me during the year. Okay. Regalim, which refers to the holy days of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, but also raglaim. Regalim, raglaim, regel, legs, leg, okay? As in, of the chariot, of the throne, or the throne. These 3 are for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the 4th is for Shmini Atzeret, right? So the 3 holidays, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, and the 4th, Shmini Atzeret, which is the 8th day of the celebration right after the 7th day of Sukkot. And our sages say that this regel, leg, is a holy day within itself. Like we said, I don't know if we said, not in this class, but in many times before that. Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah, is a holiday for what? All the other holidays that we have, we celebrate something that took place. This is celebrating something that will take place. I'd like to add another point from a Kabbalistic point of view when it comes to the Sfirot. As we know, each Sphira, each attribute, has a color, a specific color attributed to it. Some attributes have several colors. For instance, Chesed, on the right side, right? On the right side, it's always the side of mercy. And there you have the colors of white, silver, and light blue, Tchelet. On the left side, which is judgment, you have red, gold, and pink. Also, specifically, you could say according to the body, right? The father is mercy. The mother is judgment. The father is the bones, which is white, and the mother is the flesh, which is pink, right? Tiferet is bright yellow. But Malchut, what is the color of Malchut? Malchut is black. Now, the uniqueness of black in the world, right, is that it's not only a color, but it's also a shade, and a dominant one at that. Whatever color you mix into it, it doesn't disturb the blackness, right? But rather the black absorbs all the colors. That is exactly what Malchut does. So remember, we just mention three right now of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferet. There's still Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. There's three more over there, not to mention Keter, Chochmah, Binah, and even Dat. So all these things, but everything culminates into kingship, into that black, right? So all these colors, they each have their own, and they all give, because everything trickles down. Malchut is the only one that receives, and part of its uniqueness also is that it can receive all of them. All of them. It is the only one that does not give but receives. As a result, it may inhabit them all as well. This is also the matter of the Amidah prayer, right? So just so you understand that this is what we're talking about, that David is like a piece of them all, okay? You also have in the Amidah prayer, the way we start Tfilat Amidah 3 times a day, blessed are you, Lord our God, the God of our fathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob, the great, mighty, and awesome God, exalted God who bestows bountiful kindness, who creates all things, who remembers the piety of the patriarchs, and who, in love, brings a redeemer to their children's children for the sake of his name. Okay, but before that, where do we see David in the big three over here? Before we even start the prayer, when we take the 3 steps back, we say the verse from Psalms 51:17, Adonai sfatai tiftach, ufi yagid tehilatecha. O Lord, you shall open my lips, and my mouth will recite your praise. In other words, we start off already right there with David, and then we bring in the 3 patriarchs over there afterwards. And there you have the 4. So this is our class for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please send me an email if you have any questions about the class, about teachings, about anything else. And as always, thank you so much, really, for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and have a Shabbat Shalom.